Hi, I'm Warschaw. I'm the director of the Center for the Political Future here at USC Dornsife. My co-director is Mike Murphy. We battled each other for years and years and years in the political trenches, but the truth of the matter is we both believe in friendship and in civility and in the possibility that people with different views can actually talk to each other. And that's what we have been trying to do for almost 10 years now here at the center. So this kind of looks like an election night crowd.
It does. 73 grand a year and we can't get chairs here. It's unbelievable. Sitting on the floor.
And
Yeah.
okay, so
All right.
here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk for about 20 minutes
It'll
with
only
each
seem
other.
like an hour, but go ahead, Bob.
And depending on your point of view, it could seem like a day. Back and forth with each other, and then I want to open this up to questions because there are an awful lot of people here, and you ought to be able to ask those questions. I'll start off by saying to Mike, what happened Tuesday night?
I'm sorry, I have this cough. Wow, big election. It was kind of the rocket flare to start what will be a very fascinating 3 years, but really in many ways 2-year period in American politics. Because next year we have the midterms, and then what people forget is the presidential race really starts in the second half of 2027, because all the party primaries are in early 2028. And why does that count? Well, we're in a rare situation where both primaries, barring some surprises from the president, are open seats with no incumbent. And so both parties will figure out what they are. So it's going to be terrifying because we're going to have a lot of crazy bumps in our new politics along the way. You will have time to ponder that as you walk home, since the flights are all being canceled out of LAX apparently from the shutdown. But you have plenty of time. But as far as Bob's question, last night was, dog bites cat, but the dog kind of ate the cat because they were Democratic states and they did the Democratic thing. New Jersey and Virginia and the gubernatorial. Comrade Mayor Mondami, and we're talking about that in New York, but they're all Democratic places. California passed Prop 50 on a partisan basis, but the margin was the story. It was enormous. And I'll just finish by saying the real indicator, which has a lot of people on the Republican side quite worried, and they should be, in D.C., is look at the down ballot races which are driven by Trump and party brand. In Georgia, any Georgians here? So you have an esteemed public service commission there, which is elected essentially of regions, but statewide. The two Republicans both lost by 20 points, just for having an R after their name. And the Democrats haven't carried those races since 2009. In Western, any Pennsylvanians there? Anybody from Allegheny County? Because you've been making trouble. Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh in the west of Pennsylvania, had 460, either 9 or 7, we're say 469 local contests, dog catcher, county council, whatever it was. Republicans, and it is a Democrat-tilt county, but still, of those 467 races, Republicans won 11. So this was big, and it had the final impact of taking the Republicans taking the Democrats, who were all curled up in a ball, clutching pearls and whimpering, and now they're all Godzilla. It has put a huge injection in the Democratic Party that, wait a minute, we're not the losers, we can win if we talk about stuff people care about. If we don't wave New York Times editorials about constitutionality around, as much as I agree with them, and talk about the cost of stuff and your cousin getting laid off and how are we going to pay for grandma's meds. So the agenda has been set. The midterms are going to be hard fought. The president's going to try to change the subject a lot of times. I said the biggest loser last night was not, believe it or not, the Republicans. It was the Venezuelans. I'd dig a bomb shelter because we're heading for some wag the dog stuff, I believe. But anyway, huge, as much as the Democrats could have wished for.
Colossal, consequential. And I say that because even though these were Democratic states, people thought, for example, that New Jersey was going to be a close gubernatorial race. It was a landslide. People in Virginia an attorney general, incumbent Republican, lost to a Democratic challenger who had sent violent text messages about the Republican Speaker of the House, and people thought he was dead. He won by 6 points. I think the election was fundamentally a referendum on Trump. And yesterday, when I was on British television talking about this, they all wanted to talk about Mandami. And I said, but so much more stuff happened than what happened in New York City. And, Virginia, very closely divided legislature a week ago.
Not now.
Now the Democrats have 64 seats out of 100. And they're going to redistrict and pick up an extra congressional seat. The reason this happened, and Mike alluded to this in my view, is twofold. One, Trump's ratings on the economy are now worse than Biden's ratings were at their lowest level. He was elected because people thought he could deal with affordability, and they think he's not dealing with affordability. And they're frustrated. Today, 70% of people in a poll said they're paying a lot more for groceries. They're having to sacrifice things. So people were dissatisfied. And they were trying to send a message. In New York, which is sui generis in many ways, Mandami might very well have lost to a different kind of Democrat. But he wasn't going to lose to Andrew Cuomo because Andrew Cuomo was too damaged. The Republican nominee was irrelevant. In fact, his vote sort of melted away to Cuomo. It's actually quite interesting to reflect on the fact that one of the storied names in Democratic politics for almost 50 years now is no longer going to be heard much. I mean, I think Andrew Cuomo had his last hurrah, if you can call it a hurrah. So Democrats going forward are going to have to be a big tent party. You're going to have so-called moderate Democrats who, I think I'm a Kennedy, FDR Democrat, and I'm not. People didn't used to call me moderate. They used to.
Well, hell no.
They used to call me radical.
Yeah.
But
I've seen his file. Yeah. Shortwave radio to the KGB in the attic during the 80s.
Well, actually, I hated the KGB, but there were certain things like national health insurance that I, really cared about. So I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats like that. They're going to be running. You're going to see some people like Mandami. I don't think they're going to be as successful in most places. Democrats, in my view, and you can all tell me I'm wrong a year from now, Democrats are going to win the House. And for the first time, they're beginning to think they have a chance to win the Senate. And when Mike says that Trump's going to try and change the subject and invade Venezuela, for example, I think that might very well be true. He can't change the subject. What we've learned is again and again and again, and especially in the last few years, our elections are about what you care about, not what the candidate wants them to be about. Joe Biden learned that in 2024. Kept talking about all the good things he'd done, and people kept saying, I can't afford eggs. Why haven't you done something about that? So I think it could be a dangerous thing to go into Venezuela. There's a lot of jungle. I did a couple campaigns there. A lot of jungle, and not a place that you'd want to put a lot of American troops in. I suspect he'll try and use air power if he does anything.
He'll do the Clinton thing, cruise missiles, and he doesn't want a war. And the top admiral there resigned rather than keep blowing up fishing boats with aircraft carriers. But I agree with what Bob said. I just add two caveats to it. What Trump will try to do is move the conversation. Bob is right. The law of gravity is economic kitchen table stuff. But he'll create culture war fights. And the Democrats, who might have learned something last night, have a long history of always taking the bait on a culture war fight. And the Republicans know that. So that'll be a test of the Democrats. And then second, and I agree with Bob, I've been saying for a while, I think it's going to be a wave election. I think the Senate which looks Republican based on where the races are, it'll be tough for them to win it, not impossible, but I bet they close the margin. I think they are going to win the House. As far as Mondami is concerned, it is a special situation. Mondami was a very good political athlete. Happy warrior, very fast on his feet. You know, he kind of had a perfect storm because he had two major candidates everybody hated, Cuomo and Adams. Adams dropped out. But Cuomo had an anchor around his neck from minute one. And there is an affordability crisis in New York. Hell, there's one in LA. So in many of the big cities there is. So he was able to kind of exploit that. The only note I'd say is there was a lot of talk in New York, well, yeah, he's putting on this show, but you know, once he sits down behind the big desk and they show him the briefing book, he'll get pragmatic, he's gonna back off a little. But on election night, instead of doing the normal victory speech, all right, elections, we're all gonna come together, we love this city, we love it, you know, on all levels, and I've got a lot of new ideas, and happy-go-lucky, here we go. Instead, he opened up, let's have a round of applause for Eugene Debs, and he went right for the Howard Dean shouting, we won the war, and we know who's with us, and we know who isn't, and did the opposite of that. Now, that's a particular mistake, my view, and weird, because I didn't expect a mistake from him. He's a shrewd operator. But running New York City is like trying to massage a porcupine. 6 months go by and you no longer have any fingers. Look at the last mayors. It eats mayors. The only way to massage the porcupine is have a lot of friends with gloves to help you. And that speech was not a Dale Carnegie approved coalition building speech. That was for all you people who think I didn't mean all this crazy stuff. Whoa, I have a plan. So they can still course correct, but that to me was a pretty good tell if you want to buy an apartment there in a year, a pretty bad tell if he has a pragmatic mindset to actually being able to govern that huge angry porcupine. So that was weird.
Yeah, it might be a porcupine, but I don't think a lot of people are going to pick up and move to Florida. In fact, some of the big guys who moved to Florida to save money on taxes, I think their wives got very unhappy and they decided to move back to New York. He's going to get some of what he wanted. They can open 4 city grocery stores.
Yeah.
That's not a hard thing to do. It's much more complicated to have free bus service because that's the MTA. He doesn't control the MTA, and the bus revenue is what helps the MTA keep going. Universal child care is very popular, but the governor is opposed, Democrat is opposed to raising taxes to pay for it, but she says she's for it now. So we'll see what they get and what they don't get, and I think he will keep fighting for this. By the way, I think the election night speech is kind of overemphasized. I mean, yesterday he's on the phone with Jamie Dimon, saying we need to get together and talk about what we can do in the city together. So I think you'll see a fair amount of that without him giving up the essential character of the 4 big things he campaigned on, all of which, by the way, went to affordability. He talked about it in a different and more specific way than, say, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey or Spanberger, but I think he will get some of this. And then where his mayoralty goes from there, I don't know. He is one of the most naturally talented politicians I have seen in a long, long time. Normally you see politicians, they're going into an event and shaking hands with people, and every time you would see him going into an event, if somebody wanted to talk to him, he'd stop and talk and listen to them. And it just became a phenomenon, reinforced, by the way, by social media, which I think is increasingly powerful in political campaigns, and reinforced by young people, because young people are graduating from places like this, and they're saying, why am I still living in my parents' house? When am I going to get a job that's going to make it worthwhile to have spent all this money to get the education that I got? And there's a lot of frustration, and they can't, part of it is, even if they get a job, they can't afford to rent anything. Try to rent something on the west side of LA. You know, you got to spend a lot of money.
But the other problem is trying to build something.
Yeah.
You know, it's supply and demand. We're crushing people. I totally agree with Bob that he's totally talented. The question is the politics of a lot of what he wants to do, because you need Albany. And he got 50% of the vote running against two gargoyles. Fair win, but not the mandate he'll need to muscle everybody. But we'll find out. We'll see. He has skill.
He's the first person to get a million votes for mayor since 1969, or over a million votes since 1969. Look, we're going to stop this, you know, in half an hour. And there's so many people here. We're going to shut up and let you ask us questions about what you care about. Anybody?
Yes, sir. White hat.
We'll repeat the questions. So.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at how Trump has had so much power over other politicians and how his way of doing things. Is that something that's just special about him, and should that be fading as he becomes lame duck, or will other people be able to use that playbook going forward?
So the question is, how does Trump have the hypnotic control over so many politicians? And no, look, politicians are entrepreneurs, and they got to get through Republican primaries, where Trump has a lot more power in primaries than he does in the general election. So they're afraid of losing their primary and giving up the free haircuts and going back to the old insurance agency in Mellonville. So there's a lot of concern because they're thinking, well, does Trump kill me in a primary, or do I stick with him and lose the general election? That is the number one topic in most of the Republican cloakroom right now. And traditionally, they've been like, well, I'm in a safe district if I can just get through the primary. But of the 35 or so swing districts, they may turn into 45 if we have a wave election, and people are terrified. So a few are going to break loose. You're starting to see it over the shutdown, and I believe there will be a wave of two things. Retirements, because if you're in the House and you're in the minority, you have no power. You're a potted plant. In the Senate, minority has power, not in the House. So they'll be calling the Railroad Tie Association, wondering if that $300,000 a year job is still open. The other thing, we've already seen a few. The other thing is once filing deadline is over, generally sometimes end of this year, often in the beginning of next year, and nobody in an aluminum foil Uncle Sam suit can file in the primary against them, then they start trying to run for the tall grass a little. It'll be subtle. They're worried about alienating Trump's voters, but they will be out of the primary danger zone. And there was a leak in one of the papers today about a bunch of Repubs trying to figure out how to do that. They're trying to get a little farther away from the problem.
You have a whole lot of people in the Republican Party right now in the House and the Senate who are praying that the Supreme Court overturns Trump's tariffs.
Yeah.
Because that will help moderate the cost of living. They don't believe in tariffs in the first place, but they've gone along with them, and they've refused to break with them, with a few conspicuous exceptions, for exactly the reason Mike talked about. I've never seen someone have that much control over the members of their own party as Trump has. It was a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, and it succeeded. Trump, I talked about the natural political talent of Mandami. Trump has a different kind of political talent, but it's real and it's natural. And people said, oh, he was a great, successful businessman. We saw him on The Apprentice. And that's why he got reelected, by the way, in 2024, because they thought, well, he can fix the economy. He knows what he's doing.
I do think he'll fade if he loses the midterms, because his brand is tough guy winner. And if he's weak guy loser, it's kryptonite for him. He won't collapse. But on the edges, he'll be more in the rearview mirror in late 27, mid 27 than he is right now.
Yeah. He said the reason Republicans lost the other night was because he wasn't on the ballot.
And he never will be.
He was on the ballot. You just ask those poor public service commissioners in Georgia, who probably didn't do anything to get defeated. They just, as Mike said, had an R after their name.
Tim Echols was a great public service. One of the best EV guys in the country. He happened to be a Republican, which was brave. And he got clipped by 19 points. He'd been there since 2011.
Yeah.
So,
Next person? Yeah, go ahead.
yes, sir.
What do you think of the viability of Tellerico and Plattner in their respective Democratic senatorial campaigns and ultimately?
Tallarico is the young guy, 35 years old, running in Texas, very articulate. I think he's charismatic too. What has to happen for him to win is Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, has to win the primary.
Against the incumbent Senator Cornyn, who's a little more of a normie conservative Republican
Right.
versus Paxton, who's something else.
Yeah. And that's number one. And number two, it does have to turn into a Democratic wave election. Now, Tallarico still has to get through a primary. But I think he may very well capture people's imagination. Mandami started out at 1% in the polls, and he could be the nominee. I think Graham Plattner in Maine has much more trouble. I think the Nazi tattoo or Nazi-like tattoo that he now says he's covered up was a real problem. I think Susan Collins is very vulnerable in Maine, but probably much more vulnerable to the incumbent Democratic governor than to someone who is more in the mold of AOC or Mandami. That's not Maine. So
Yeah, and Plattner, these fascinating, remember the helicopter pilot, Amy McGrath? There are these candidates that come out of the box and they're fascinating and new and people get kind of drunk on them. They don't tend to do well on the second look. And campaigns often have a second and a third look. So I think that star will burn out. On the other hand, in Texas, likely he doesn't win, but he's going to do well enough if he wins the primary that he'll be back and I'll bet he'll win the next one.
Okay, another question? Yeah, all the way in the back.
Mike, when you said that Democrats have historically taken the bait on cultural wars, what does that mean? And then for you about both, what should Democrats do differently going forward?
Yeah, Democrats win when they're talking kitchen table economics, stuff that's relevant to people. My pal Axelrod has a good thing, which is you sit around your kitchen table debating the Constitution and Trump's illegality when you have enough money for food. Rather not that they just, like GM just laid off 3,000 people in Illinois and Michigan because Trump slaughtered all the EV stuff. I guarantee you in some of those factory towns, they're not really getting out the Federalist Papers to figure out what they think of the latest Supreme. They're thinking, how the hell are we going to keep the House? So the culture war stuff it's bait. The old Helms trick of we need to debate building a monument to our Confederate war heroes and start a cultural war between Appalachian whites who were poor but culturally conservative and African-American base voters in the Democratic Party. Wedges. There's enough terrorism. We ought to arm airline pilots. And then we get in a big gun control fight over that rather than the cost of stuff. Joe Biden, Trump's making, the big thing for Democrats, Trump's making the same mistake Biden did. Biden thought he could jawbone his way out of a bad economy. It's better than you think. I have a chart, the turkey sales up 5%. We've never done better. Well, people, you can't fight the cash register every week. That's the mark to market here. Trump's out there saying, oh, they're lying to you. It's all conspiracy. The economy's great. And we're about to hit the country with these big Obamacare price increases, particularly in red states. So, Trump likes to kind of bend reality and create sidebar fights. The economic reality is really hard to bend. Yeah. And the tariffs, Bob's right. The best thing that could happen to Trump is we undo this tariff thing because it's slow poison. You go to the Farm Belt now, if you're anywhere near the soybean exporters, those farmers borrow a ton of money against this year's crop income, which isn't there now. I know somebody in the implement business, tractors and harvesters and stuff, they're all 45%. If it happens 2 years in a row, that implement dealership will go away and John Deere's laying people off. So this thing is like a poison moving through the economy. And if it goes away, the rest of the economy is strong enough, the information economy, that it could give Trump a little economic comeback next year in the third quarter when the voting, happens. So As long as the Democrats can stay focused on how you doing. I had an ad friend in Madison Avenue who wanted to pay for some subway signs. And he asked me for a slogan for people taking the train to work. And I said, Trump's had 5 bankruptcies, now he's working on yours. You know, I think they're going up. Just keep it on the stuff that affects people's daily lives. That's the key.
Yeah, look, how do Democrats avoid taking the bait on these issues? Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican nominee in Virginia, ran several $1 million worth of ads on trans issues. And Abigail Spanberger just kept talking about the economy, talking about the economy, talking about the economy. So one key is don't take the bait.
Yeah, don't fuel it.
The second thing is Democrats have to understand that going all the way back to FDR, the engine that pulled the Democratic train up the hill was the economy. Social issues were the caboose. You could do them, but you just didn't want to try and make them the engine. When people try to make them the engine, then you get in big trouble. And you take Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, who's going to run for president. He vetoed an anti-trans bill right in the middle of his campaign and kept talking about the economy and won by 5 points more than he won the first time. So you just can't take the bait, and you've got to be strategic about this. Someone else? A lady. We need a lady. There.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe relevant to our kids' education, I was curious about your thoughts on Trump's challenges to institutions of higher education.
Yeah.
So USC obviously rejected the compact. The overheads haven't been brought down to 15%. Is it going to affect?
Yeah, big chilling effect. It's a problem for research universities, it's thuggish behavior. If you can
It's a
wait it
problem
out.
for you because you might get sick, and the research university might have found a way to cure you, and a lot of that stuff is getting strangled right now.
You know, it will pass because there's a clock on Trump, but it's big pain, and I tell my friends fight. Now there is a legit issue about kind of the ROI on upper education because we subsidize it so much, you know, it tends to keep costing more. So there are some arguments about all this, but Trump's doing it for political reasons. It's not a legit debate. He's just looking for people to punish. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a question for both of y'all. You have to bet an amount of money that matters to you. Who is going to be the Democratic nominee in 2020?
Oh,
Well, I'll bet $2 million of Bob's money. You know, I'll give Bob a minute to come up with the answer because he's an expert on the Democrats. I'll wiggle out of it, but with an argument. They asked Napoleon once who his best general was. He had these marshals who were very good generals. They all hated each other, like big generals always do. So Napoleon got out of the question by saying, well, they're all great, and they're just too tall. However, that little sergeant over in the corner with the map case is the most valuable soldier in the Grand Army. It's my map maker. Because if I understand the terrain of the battlefield better than the other general and I can outmaneuver, and I understand where the mountains and rivers are, I'll beat him with half the army. And it was true, he did it all the time. You want to know who the nominee is? Figure out what the calendar is going to be, because that's half of it. Is Georgia going to move up, or Michigan? Or is it going to be South Carolina dominated? Is New Hampshire going to get back like it was? The calendar is in flux, and the calendar has an influence. If you're Wes Moore, you're excited about South Carolina. You're probably excited about New Hampshire, but you would love to see Atlanta or Detroit get up, because African American voters are a place where you can start to build something first. You know, the formula is African American voters, white liberals, and one of the big misnomers is that Democratic primary voters are all left-wing nuts who want to vote for AOC, who I think is going to run. But there's a chunk there. So there are about 5 or 6 who are potential real competitors. It'll be generational. And I will say the governor of California, who's not super popular here, with his sugar high of a very adroit bet he made on Prop 50, has won the 2025 preseason campaign to be the nominee, and I think he will be a contender. The big one.
Yeah, I'm going to wiggle out of answering it directly. But I want to say this. I think Democrats in general, including African Americans in South Carolina, are going to ask one overwhelming question. Who is likely to win the general election? And that's going to overcome race, ideology, and all sorts of other things for the majority of Democratic voters, not for all Democratic voters. So I think Newsom's in strong shape right now. I think Governor Beshear is, he's the kind of Clinton, Carter model, and I mean that in a kind of limited way, but in a very important one. He is a Democrat from a southern, although the Kentucky was never part of the Confederacy, from a southern state, Republican state, red state, and yet he's been able to uphold what people would think of as fundamental democratic values. So, but you can't tell till these folks get out there and campaign. I mean, look, Howard Dean was at 44% in Iowa in November. He finished third because they got a second look. And it was before he screamed, actually. They got a second look and they said, we don't think so, because the overwhelming question that year was who might have a chance to beat George W. Bush. And I think the overwhelming question going into 2028 is who has a realistic chance of becoming president as a Democrat.
I'm going to disagree quickly just to stir it up on Beshear, who's a talented politician, but I'm not sure the math for a centrist New South Democrats were like it was is there now. But he should have run for McConnell's open seat. I think he could have won it. He could be the guy who took control of the Senate for the D's, or at least tied it up. And then he'd be a rock star hero and could really go places. But we'll find out. He is talented. I agree with that.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think AOC is going to run for president. I think he's going to run against Chuck Schumer. Yeah.
That would be fun.
Is Mike Johnson ever going to go back to work? I think the federal judge said we have to get Revolver back in, Epstein files, and is Trump going to leave in 2028 when he loses?
Johnson will be Speaker until they lose the House. Then he'll be gone.
No, I mean, are they going to all go back to work?
They have to.
Oh, you mean actually go back? Yeah. But work now is performative.
Yeah.
We don't do legislation anymore. We're all on cable TV.
You got to get her in.
I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Is he going to listen to the federal judge who just said you got to get her in?
Swearing the person.
From Arizona, the Congresswoman from Arizona.
No, hell no. He's not going to listen to a federal judge. As Stalin once said when he got an angry letter from the Pope after he was shooting everybody in the 30s, how many tanks does the Pope have? As far as Epstein, Bob is an expert.
Yeah. I listen, I'm not going to.
He took notes. Yeah.
I'm not going to make any allegations about anybody in the Epstein files because I haven't seen them. Yeah. But it is very suspicious that Donald Trump ran on, I'm going to release all these files, and now they're going to any length not to release the files. And here's the problem. People say, well, they're in there redacting the files. In the computer age, those files exist in a number of places.
Yeah.
And you can't put out a redacted file that is designed to protect somebody and not run the risk that somebody else is going to hit a button on a computer and send out the real file. I think that the question of swearing in the new Democrat in Arizona is moot, because the House will go back into session very soon, and he will have to swear in.
Then he'll be forced.
What they're trying to do is pressure one of these Republicans who have signed the discharge petition into withdrawing their signature on the Epstein files. That's the only reason they're delaying. Yes, all the way there in the back.
I'm wondering what you think about Trump's treatment of federal employees and the shutdown, what effect that had on the election.
Well, it's some distance from JFK saying public service is an honorable profession, which made federal employees feel pretty good about themselves. Look, they fired people like in the weather service, and then they had to get them back. They are now, as Mike said, you could walk home maybe, because they're cutting all the flights because of the air traffic controllers. And I don't, maybe Mike can explain this. I understand that they don't like Obamacare, but the British Tories never actually really liked the National Health Service. But Margaret Thatcher had a very famous line: the National Health Service, safe in our hands, because she didn't want that to be an issue.
Right.
And right now, the idea that they don't want to keep them, that they want to see massive premium increases in Obamacare is poison for the midterm elections and poison for 2028. I don't get it.
Yeah, so both parties are making a scary bet here, which could hurt both of them. The Dems we're going to shut down unless you give us the Medicaid money and you pay the Obamacare subsidy money to keep the premiums down. And the Republicans are saying it's their fault. They shut it down. We just want to keep rolling. And so that's been the logjam. In the first couple of innings of this, I think the Republicans won. But the pain is getting worse and worse, and the Obamacare pain, which will puncture people's lives. They will feel it. They will see, my premium just went up $480 a month. I can't have health insurance. That's going to be the pain that pushes the Rs. And the Ds then will not want to make a deal because they're going to enjoy the pain and they're going to be drunk off last night. Ultimately, my prediction, made with $1 behind it because it's hard to figure out.
But I'll bet $1 million of his bucks.
Yeah, there you go. They were all taken by the tax authorities here in California.
You can always move to New York.
Yeah, right. He can have the last $100. Trump is transactional. And Trump really doesn't believe in anything other than power and tariffs. That's why these tariffs are tricky to get rid of. So I think Trump's going to say, well, I've done it. I've done what nobody else has ever been able to do. I've killed Obamacare. It's gone. I got it done. There's something new and better. Fantastic. A very bad Trump impersonation. It's Trump care. Look at your premiums. They're all going down. Look what I did. He just did it to Pfizer. There's now Pfizer RX, where they forced in a bunch of free drugs and trying to get the credit. So we're going to have Trump care, and the Republicans are all going to oh Christ, but they're going to do it for the politics of it. And he'll just try to rebrand the thing and declare victory. And I think it'll happen. Remember, shutdown pain is slow because Social Security checks go out, and then there's a big spike. Example, and I'll finish out. I know the questions. I do a lot of work in the auto industry from Detroit originally. We'd rather not let China take over the entire world auto industry, which they're probably going to do in 10 years. In order to make a car, you have to get federal approval from the National Highway Traffic Safety Inspection. They're shut down. GM's wondering, we're going to start knocking out 100,000 cars a week that are unapproved, which we can't sell. So there are all those little things now start to bust through. And the pain is going to triple. And again, wait till we take 40% of the flights out. Now that's a bluff right now, but they're probably going to do it, thinking it'll hurt the Democrats. So 10 days from now, there will be, meetings have begun, and Trump will just try to jump in front and say, it's me, I'm bringing it to an end, because of these bad Democrats. Yes? Yeah, you, please.
I guess the problem that will really don't feel like things are getting better. So the politicians have ideas and they execute and it doesn't work, and it doesn't feel better. So if you look at the data, the spending on Medicaid and Medicare, it's gone really loaded. If you look at pre-COVID now.
Yeah.
The Inflation Reduction Act did some fine things, did some things that kind of feel good, allow emergency drugs to be covered by Obamacare. But rare disease drugs cost $20 a month.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering why premiums gone up, because we allowed more things to be uninsured.
Yeah.
So, and then the Democrats said, well, let me just put a temporary tax rebate to cover some of the pain. And here we are today. I mean, things have gotten more expensive, we're covering more things. In this state, the healthcare that we're paying for legal insurance was supposed to be a small number, and got tripled. So the numbers that show that things are more expensive, and how much you can ask the taxpayers to cover some bad ideas.
Well, here's the problem with, for example, your illegal alien reference. When Prop 187 passed here in 1994, federal courts all struck it down, saying you cannot deny health care to someone because they are undocumented. And in fact, it costs more money if you treat them all the time in emergency rooms than if you provide some other way to treat them. I'm not going to argue the merits of this. I'm just going to tell you analytically. Medicare and Social Security are incredibly popular in this country. And anybody who looks like he's going after them is going to be in trouble. And Obamacare, by the way, ACA has gotten very, very popular.
But it's not about popularity, is it affordable? I mean, what if we?
Well, of course it's affordable. Of course it's affordable. We don't have to give gigantic tax cuts to people who have $1 billion. It's ridiculous.
But the other point is, in politics, tax cuts and entitlements are like moray eels. That's the eel with the teeth that slant in, and once it grabs you, it's never going back. So once you, whether or not it's a good or bad entitlement, and I can argue against a lot of entitlements. I mean, one of the problems is we consume so much healthcare costs the last 5 years of life. You know, my 90-year-old dad wants to go get a hip replacement on Medicare. I guess to improve his tennis game he hasn't played in 12 years. But the money is a one-way
that
thing.
remark,
Yeah,
by the way.
no. So they're very hard to undo, and they're very popular.
Agreed, and they're irresponsible.
We can't
Yeah.
debate. We have time for one more quick question, and then we have to end. Go ahead.
Redistricting and the fights in all the states, where do you think this is going to go? Is this a terrible?
It's probably going to be a wash or close to a wash, but its big impact, in my view, was that Gavin Newsom put all his chips on the table, and it wasn't polling well at the point when he did that, and he came out the big winner of it.
I think the Repubs are going to wind up 3 or 4 ahead if they can get all the stuff they could do done net. Not enough to overcome a wave election. And the ugly little secret here is you're a member of Congress, a Republican member or a Democrat, and your leadership comes to you and say, hey, you got a 59% district, you always win. Your thought bubble is, yes, I don't have to go back there and get yelled at. I don't have to do 3 breakfasts begging for money from blowhard lobbyists every morning. I got a good congressional life. Well, we got an idea for you. We're going to take you down to 53% chance of winning to move those to go kill off the other party. You're thinking, I'm flying back 10 times now. I'm getting yelled at parades. I got to beg people for $2 million. So you're like, okay, but deep down you hate it, which is why some of these efforts are hitting bumps. Redistricting is hard. Nobody wants to change their district if they got an easy one. So I think all 3 or 4 net Republican seats, best case for the R's. It may even wind up tied.
Yeah. We have to conclude this. We were told we have to stop at 45 minutes after.
Yeah, and they're
I
meeting
actually
here.
have to go to a board meeting, believe it or not.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
you.
all very much.